I don't think deep down Pep Guardiola wants to be playing the sort of football he played at Arsenal. I think Guardiola is in win now mode. I think he just wants to win something this season, and so he is prepared to do literally whatever it takes. Because that performance yesterday reminded me more than anything else of the man who is the kind of anti-Guardiola. That was Jose Mourinho in charge of Manchester City.
What a weekend. Liverpool Derby winners, imperfect on the field, yet somehow still perfect on paper. Bite your arm off to be near perfect on paper. Arsenal huffed and puffed, and finally Blue Peps quite surreally part bust down. Manchester United beat Chelsea in a 10-man battle, slapstick, flood-stained, borderline naval skirmish. And none of the newly promoted teams lost the game. This is a Premier League of transcendence, of tenacity, and a lot of hilarity too. And to break it all down, it's a joy to welcome back my friend, the bard of the entire region of North Yorkshire, Derby winner. Oh, he takes the Terry's chocolate orange d'or. Welcome back, Mr. Rory Smith.
I love the description of Old Trafford on Saturday as being a naval skirmish. It did feel like that at times. That is very good.
It was like you were watching wet work, Ro.
The football is best when the ball doesn't really move because it's getting caught up in a puddle. It's an extra test that players should be exposed to every now and again. Can you think your way around this problem?
I want to talk about Old Trafford in 1 second because you went to not one but 2 games on Saturday, which is hardcore. But I do need to get it out of the way because it's an enormous pressure on my little heart. Congratulations on winning the Derby. You're officially a better person than I am until April when we play again, when you'll probably be doubly better person than I am.
You know what? For a Merseyside Derby, it seemed to have very little kind of spite around it during the game. It felt a little bit like the derbies of your Rog, where it wasn't quite as poisonous. And it was interesting that the moment of controversy after the game was that the referee had only added 3 minutes of injury time in the second half, which, to be honest, isn't very many. Probably could have been more. Been a while since I've seen the old 3-minute board go up. But even then, David Moyes was so kind of conciliatory about it. It was very much, well, yeah, there probably should have been a bit more. He was genuinely baffled by the yellow card for the quick free kick. But he didn't try and turn it into a thing, and I like that. It felt like a very mature derby.
Yeah, I mean, we did grow up with the outside world of Liverpool being so dark and against the city, or feeling like it was, when both teams went down to Wembley famously for the Milk Cup, the League Cup, the Carabao Cup, the fans united and singing the name of the county, Merseyside, Merseyside, Merseyside. That's been lost, I'd say, along the way, pretty single-handedly by Rafa Benitez and his loose lip sink ships. But what do you attribute that to? A sense of Diogo Jota, his passing, putting everything into perspective.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. There was a minute's silence, or a minute's applause, before the game for two Liverpool players much older who'd passed away recently. Joey Jones, a kind of legendary defensive figure, also a Wrexham king, absolutely. Famous banner before, I think, the 1977 European Cup final. Joey ate the Frod's legs, and now he's munching Gladbach. Was back in the Kop. He was a tenacious, some would say brutal defender, Rog, if I'm completely honest, Joey Jones.
Turned a pub owner, which was very common pathway back in those days.
That's what you did. In many ways, playing professional football was like a qualification scheme for owning a pub. That's how it worked. That was the ultimate ambition.
Met him in his pub. Lovely, lovely man.
And a guy called Bobby Graham, who I'll admit I hadn't heard of, but played for Liverpool, I think, just before Joey Jones, and was obviously fondly remembered by people of a certain vintage in the crowd. And you had, obviously, the 3 stands of Anfield applauding, but then you had the big away section in the Anfield Road end also applauding. And I always wonder whether those moments change the tone of games just a little bit. Because you, in that kind of nostalgia, that reverence for what has gone before, you do remember that kind of, to an extent, you are all sharing the same memories. You might have different views on them, but it's not quite as. It's very difficult, I think, to kind of applaud Joey Jones's life and career and then get really angry at the Reds. So I don't know, it felt like a derby played out in a slightly less toxic atmosphere than quite a few of the recent ones.
God bless. Maybe we conjure that vibe again. Football played out with a sense of shared love and passion. I do think it is a sense of context. It is a sense of mourning, sense of the darkness in the greater world. I don't know what it is, but Raw, you went to 2 games, not 1, but 2 on Saturday. This blew my mind. You were both at Anfield and Old Trafford, which for many American listeners will be like, does Rory know how to break the space and time continuum? I mean, the two cities, we've got to say, they're like, on a good day, 40 minutes apart from each other. But how is that, Mad Tash, mentally between those two mighty northern kingdoms?
It's funny. I said to a friend of mine at Liverpool that I was going to leave basically on the full-time whistle to get to Manchester to go to Old Trafford, and there were 3 hours between final whistle in the Merseyside Derby and kick-off of Man United Chelsea, and I thought that's plenty of time, even allowing for the traffic. And my mate looked at me as though I was suggesting that I might nip to the moon before going home. How are you going to get there? The motorway. It's 30 miles. You'll have to settle. You'll have to leave before full time. You'll never make it. As though it was some sort of impossible distance to cover. But for all that Liverpool and Manchester are, there's that great tweet, isn't there, about in America you can drive for 4 hours and you're still in the same state. Probably more than that, to be honest, in certain states. Whereas in England, if you drive for 4 hours, the accent has already changed twice, and sandwiches are called something else.
At least twice.
Yeah. And it is the same with Liverpool and Manchester. They are 2 worlds apart, but it's 30 miles, Rog.
Yeah, I know. It's like as the crow flies, but the crow flying doesn't have to account for English roadworks rule. I'm sure you barely made it. It is like a trip between 2 different planets, though, I always find, between Liverpool and Manchester. Mentally, you're going from just 2 very different frames of mind.
Yeah, I think what was really striking, so it was cutting it slightly fine, because I don't know if you noticed, Rog, but there was quite a lot of rain in northwest England on Saturday afternoon. So the motorway was an absolute rude word. So I got into Old Trafford about half an hour before kick-off, which is fine. I had time to have a curry, so it wasn't in a desperate rush. But the mood, the pre-match meal for the media was a curry. It was very nice.
I thought you stopped off at Curry Mile just as a flourish. I'm like, so Rory, Pete
yeah,
Rory.
You, to be fair, if I'd got to rush home to go to the Curry Mile, that would have been really pushing it. No, the mood around the 2 stadiums, I think, was really interesting. That Liverpool, there is this sort of cheeriness now because, as we'll get into, they're not playing especially well. You can put question marks over their performances, but they are looking imperious in terms of results. Whereas with Manchester United, it's almost a defiance, like a clinging on to hope rather than despair. So there's a slight fever, a frenzy around Manchester United now that isn't present at Anfield. And for a long, long time, Rog, that wasn't how that relationship worked. Liverpool were the club that was desperately striving, desperately hoping, seeing things that aren't there. And United was just sort of blissfully wandering along, winning every game.
And you lay that current reality on top of the 2 modern period psyches of those 2 cities. Liverpool always as a city, the feeling that it's been hard done to, and Manchester, the rapper H from Manchester came on this show, and I asked him to sum up what Manchester, how he did the epitome of Manchester mindset, and he didn't have to think. He just goes, if you hear 4 strangers arguing ever and one of them has a Manchester accent, he's right. That is, so you layer the insecurity of the current day and the sudden swagger, and you've just got the yin and the yang, and it is like 2 unbelievable 40 minutes apart, but just parallel universes, parallel footballing experiences.
But you have to remember, Rog, that this is from a Yorkshire perspective. And the Yorkshire perspective of all of those places is that if you ask, I'm sure I've said this to you before, if you ask a Scouser to describe Liverpool, they will say it's the greatest city in the world. And if you ask a Manc to describe Manchester, they will say it's the greatest city in the world. And if you ask someone from Leeds to describe Leeds, they'll say it's all right.
It's all right.
And that is the definition. So they're all the same to us. They're all the same. It all feels the same.
You know what? The only asterisk I put on that, the Liverpool person would say Liverpool is the best city in the world. And they probably add on a sunny day, no place
they
finer.
might do. Yeah.
The Mancunian would say best place in the universe, and then would also add on and any undiscovered universe. Also, there's a slight difference in tenor and tone, but you're dead right. 100 times out of 100 times. What's Leeds like? It's all right. I will say huge respect to you for charging between the 2 planes, trains, and automobiles and curries, man. I am just proud of myself in between games when I'm able to get my arse off the couch. Get a fresh beer, refill my Breakfast Club mug, or take my dog out, Martin, for a quick spell of frisbee.
Those are all legitimate achievements, Rog.
You can pick
moving.
2 out of 3. I'd never claim to be able to do all of them, baby. Huge respect to you, Rory Smith, you time traveller. But let's start with a toast. I want to raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day, best Mickey since Arteta, to the fact today's a massive day in Men in Blazers world. Today, we're announcing the launch of Vamos, a new content network delivering authentic storytelling to that incredibly passionate US Hispanic soccer community. It's a platform that's taken us a long time to build. Started with a single podcast, Vamos, with Hercules Gomez. And we're delighted he's now being joined by the incredibly talented Give and Go boys with their passionate audience that they built over the past couple of years in Austin, Texas. Together, we're going to create 5-day-a-week coverage of El Tri, US men's team, MLS, Liga MX, and global football around the world from their incredible POV. And as we head into that ever-looming World Cup year, their voices, these stories, this community is so incredible to be able to build together. We've got so many new faces about to join us there. Links to follow are in the show notes. Godspeed to all. Come and join us. And vamos.
It's brilliant news, Rog, because that is a driving force of soccer culture in the States, are those kind of second, third, fourth generation fans. This is very much like a European perspective, but Liga MX, for the standard of play, for the size of the teams, for the popularity of the game there's not maybe quite as much coverage outside Mexico as there should be. So that, I think, is really exciting.
To more together, we could not be more excited. And one quick note, and this one's really important, dear GFOPs, great friends of this pod. Our 2025 Men in Blazers survey is live now. It's your chance to tell us what do you love, what do you not like? How can we make everything we do, from the pods to the newsletters to the interviews to the leagues we cover, even better? We want to deliver for you what you want in this World Cup year. So to all of you who've already lent your voice, thank you. We are so grateful. Your responses truly shape how we cover this game that we all adore. And if you haven't filled it in yet, it really does only take a few minutes. The link is in the show notes and it helps us more than you'll ever know. But let's get to the football raw. Let's start where it began this weekend with PAIN. Liverpool 2. Everton 1. A game that beforehand felt a bit darkness on the edge of town for me. I'm not going to lie. Liverpool, the perfect start to the season. Each game won tenaciously, magically late. When the other team was just exhausted, shattered, mind and body ground down. Liverpool just keep on keeping on. Perfect start. Somehow, still to click. Because of that, we had a glimmer of hope going into this one. And it's the glimmer of hope which makes it feel all the more hopeless, Raw. Because I know hope is a trap for Everton fans. You know, we had that footballing mystic in Tiny Shimpad, St. Jack Grealish, Ilian Dye. We knew we hadn't won a derby before a crowd in the 21st century, which is mind-blowing, even more mind-blowing. David Moyes' record at Anfield. Our beautiful man had not won a Premier League game at Anfield in his entire career, no matter what club he took there. 22 times he's tried, 22 times he's failed. Like, even Sisyphus hears that and is like, oh my God, that's crazy. Slot dropped Wirtz, said he was, quote, still coming to terms with the physicality, and that we know the derby is the most filthy game in football. Isak not really yet fit, returning to this more robust McAllister, Gravenberch, Soboslai midfield. How did you feel going into this one? Take us back from your POV before kick-off.
But that's the interesting thing about derbies, isn't it? Because you will have gone into that game feeling a sort of bottomless pit of dread because Liverpool are objectively better than Everton. I went into it feeling a bottomless pit of dread because Liverpool are objectively better than Everton, and that, to me, only means that Everton win. That they somehow get a corner, Dominic Calvert-Lewin returns for one game only to score a goal. It never works out the way that you think. I guess we're told so much that the form book goes out the window in derbies, that there is no... Those 4 games that Liverpool had won in a style that was kind of simultaneously convincing and unconvincing. None of that means anything. So I went into it, as I always do with derbies, Rog, this will become a theme. You take a point.
Really?
Yeah,
honestly,
100%.
so funny. I got to tell you, all my Everton WhatsApps were all just like, bite your arm off for a 2-0 loss. I was like, bite your arm off. But yes, maybe. Take it out. Honestly, going into this game, the goal is just to avoid self-soiling humiliation. I'm not going to lie, but I do love your idea, and this was possibly Moyes' mistake. If the team sheet had Cahill, Stephen Naismith, and maybe on the subs bench, Dominic Calvert-Lewin for a late cameo, that would have made you crap your pants with fear.
100 chuck in Duncan Ferguson. It would have just been sort of Liverpudlian nightmares coming to life. No, I think maybe that's the difference though, is that my bottomless pit of dread is I'd be fine with a draw. Yours is I want to lose this game, but in a way that's not deeply humiliating. That maybe illustrates the difference between the clubs.
I want to leave with my dignity, like the Whitney Houston song is all I can tell you. But the opening exchanges, unfortunately, we may have both had dread in our mind, but they really were cut from my worst fears. Let's be honest, Raw. Everton cautious, very old Moyesian trope. Liverpool just targeting Mykolenko mercilessly. That sweet, beleaguered man on repeat on their right-hand side. And Mourinho always talked about how you can smell a goal before it came. My God, it stank of goals in that opening series of exchanges. And then Mo Salah, so casually, like a golfer just having a laugh at Top Golf on the driving range, casually unleashed the quite stunning diagonal, which Gravenberch responded to raw. I mean, number one, what a footballer Ryan Gravenberch is. We'll talk about him. Still just 23. And here, as that ball came towards him, so unbelievably composed. He connected with the ball, almost caressed it first time, instinctively, balletically on the swivel. It's like a Dutch Bruce Lee. I can only described it as what he did was like he kind of Zlataned it into the net raw. But it was the way it grazed on its flight, just the ether of Tark's head, and then singed the fingertips of little Pickford as it scorched across their helpless beings. It was both a goal and it taunted us in the process.
As all the best goals do, I suppose. The best goals are always those, or the ones that look the best are those where there is a possibility of them being stopped. And it's that proximity to that might not have happened that makes them so satisfying. It was a brilliant finish. It's not that you could see it coming in the sense that you wouldn't necessarily have put money on Gravenberch scoring, but one of the themes of Liverpool's season so far is definitely that he is playing much further forward. And I was also, Rog, as part of my campaign to live all of my life on Britain's motorway network, I was at Anfield for the Atletico Madrid game on Wednesday as well. And it was really noticeable there, again, against the team who'd set up nice and deep, who were there to kind of try and shut down the passing lanes, close off the spaces, all that stuff. One of the ways Liverpool got around that was by Ryan Gravenberch pushing forward and playing as a number 10. And I think that might be something they've worked on deliberately this season to try and just throw in a little bit more uncertainty, a little bit more unpredictability into how Liverpool attack.
I mean, it was one of those goals that created a series of emotions. I've talked about it a lot. When Everton do concede it, there's a profound sadness, there's an agony, but there's almost a relief too. It's like my worst fears have been realised. We're still alive. Our limbs are still intact. But I did feel like a flash from the Liverpool POV, the celebration Soboslai charging towards Gravenberch, unleashing the, I think it was like, he did like the Bobby Firmino celebration. Like, yeah, you did the Bobby Firmino celebration as you finished. That was amazing, man. And I thought, God, why is it never us, Raw? Why is it never us dancing and joking and laughing? But enough about me. Because I do want to talk about Gravenberch quickly. We all now know him as one of the defending champions' most important players. I do think when you watch him play, goal and assist in this one ultimately, can we remind ourselves, and I'm saying this as we evaluate, aka take a mighty dump on the heads of the like of Florian Wirtz and Milos Kerkez, that if we were to evaluate Ryan Gravenberch after his first season, when he wasn't really able to impose or reveal himself consistently, most times it takes time to define yourself in this league, and we kind of knee-jerk write players off at our peril.
Yeah, and you also need the right context. And I know that's a little bit of a cliche, but in that first season, Gravenberch came into a Jurgen Klopp team that was unexpectedly kind of pushing for the title. They'd gone back, Liverpool, they'd reverted to full-on heavy metal football. It was chaotic, it was maddening, it didn't really make any sense. They were building massive leads, we'll come back to this, and still not looking secure. It was really emotionally fraught. And I think that he didn't suit that type of football, that type of team, that type of occasion. And when Arne Slot comes in and says, you be the number 6, you know what that is. You've come through the Ajax Academy. You will have played in every single midfield position. You will have interpreted each of these roles. You know what I will expect from you in that role. Gravenberch was just like, yeah, I can do that, and he did it brilliantly. Liverpool had been looking at him for a long, long time. He'd always been this player who was about to be the next big thing. I remember going to see Erik ten Hag, Rog, Do you remember Erik ten Hag?
Vaguely.
There was a point when Erik ten Hag was quite a good manager, and it was when he was in charge of Ajax. And I went to see him in 2019, the year that Ajax made the semi-finals of the Champions League. And we were talking about Donny van der Beek and Frenkie de Jong and Matthijs de Ligt and all this generation of players that had got Ajax back onto their perch. And Erik ten Hag was really no nonsense about it. His view was very much, look, they're going to have to leave this summer because we've got these other kids coming through and they need to play. And the name that he singled out was Ryan Gravenberch. He said, we have to play Gravenberch. He's coming through. So Frenkie de Jong will have to leave. That's the way that Ajax worked. And Liverpool were aware of Gravenberch then. They'll have watched him in his first couple of seasons at Ajax, where he looked like the heir to Frenkie de Jong. Then he went to Bayern Munich and had a really kind of disappointing season. And at that point, I think a lot of clubs, certainly traditionally, would have been like, well, he's been to one of the elite, it's not worked out, he's not good enough, he'll have to go and play for Fulham. But Liverpool remembered and thought, well, it's just that Bayern haven't got the most out of his talent. So they waited for him to have a bad year at Bayern. They got him on the cheap. They waited for him to have a bad year at Liverpool and persevered with him. And then when the context was right, when things had changed enough that the world was kind of arranged in a way that Ryan Gravenberch might like, he went into the team, he looked like the player that Liverpool had seen at Ajax, and they're now reaping the benefits of that patience. And I think he, more than anybody maybe, illustrates how joined up Liverpool's approach is, how consistent it is, and the benefit of doing it that way.
That phrase, how Liverpool operate outside of managers, is just, I mean, it's one that's probably the hardest trick in football. And you saw it pay off in this moment. You were at Anfield. It felt on the television as if in that moment, the stadium just turned into quite fearsome, intimidating crucible settings, to be honest. Boom. And in those moments, you wonder how the opposing team, my team, were going to respond. God bless us. We kept trying to hit the ball long to beautiful, beautiful Beto, which honestly meant the ball just kept coming back down our throats. Felt very, very... hello darkness, my old friend, and that became real. 29th minute, it was Ekitike running onto a stunningly intelligent through ball from Gravenberch. Ekitike, so clinical, so ruthless. That finish through the legs of Jordan Pickford, it was like as sharp as a paper cut. I'm gonna say Ekitike, is it 3 league goals in 5 games to start to the season? You could make the case, I'm not saying you will, but you could make the case that Isak is worth $170 million, just as like a large motivational sign for Ekitike saying, you can do it. He's almost like a motivational decoy for Hugo.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Because of all the signings that Liverpool made this summer, Ekitike felt like the riskiest. Because Kerkez had played brilliantly in the Premier League, so he'd adapt, everyone was sure of that. Florian Wirtz, everybody agreed was generational talent. He'd be fine. Eventually, Isak, already well established in the Premier League. It felt like Ekitike was the unknown. That young striker who'd done well at Eintracht Frankfurt and done well at Reims, but hadn't shone at Paris Saint-Germain. And yet, if anything, he's been the one who's found the transition the easiest. He looks completely at home in the Premier League. He looks totally unfazed by the step up. He's scoring goals. And, I mean, if I was Alexander Isak, I'd be thinking, I suppose, at the moment, this is good. I can get fit while this guy scores the goals. But longer term, you'd be thinking, well, hang on, I'm going to have to figure out a way of playing with Hugo Ekitike. And
I know, Raw, Liverpool will find a way. But 2-0 up, Raw. I did text you. I said, now we've got you right where we want you. 2-0 up. This is where you switch off and go slack. Was not tight with total confidence, I'll admit, because it didn't really feel like we had a foothold. We were more shell-shocked, I think. We had Verge mocking Tark. We had Connor Bradley just perma-fouling Grealish and laughing. And it just gave me the worst Derby feeling, one that I'm all too familiar with, the feeling of being owned. I hate that. But then into the second half, Tierno Barry on for poor Beto. I will say Everton's Achilles heel this season is the lack of a truly selfish, self-confident, sharp-edged striker. Our fullbacks are not so great either. But Barry's movement, his willingness to harry, to hassle, did change the game. It became scrappier, more a bog. There was a lot more ball at Jack Grealish's feet in space, which is a dangerous game. And we weren't quite confident, but we were playing football. We were trying to exert ourselves. The noise in my house, when in the 58th minute, Raw, sweet, St. Jack Grealish sent a stunner back stick, beautiful, beautiful Ilian die, cushioned it down like a footballing sorcerer, and Idrissa Gana Gueye, God bless, slapped up to smite the ball with his fist of unrelenting justice. What did it feel like in the stadium in that second rule?
It felt like, for crying out loud, they're doing it again. That's exactly what it felt like, Rog, because Liverpool fans have seen this after the Atleti game. Diego Simeone, who by that stage had calmed down from his altercation with the steward, used the word suffered to describe how his team had kind of fared at Anfield. He said, we suffered Anfield. And a friend of mine, Neil Atkinson of the Anfield Rap, wrote a piece in which he said, join the club, Diego. We're all suffering Anfield this season, which I think is exactly the right attitude. The Liverpool did it against Bournemouth. They were 2-0 up, flying, conceded 2 goals, had to snatch victory from the jaws of a draw or whatever. They were ahead twice against Newcastle, and ended up needing a 100th minute winner. They did it against Atletico. Atletico were outplayed in the first 10-15 minutes to a truly astonishing degree. And then Liverpool just sort of thought, well, this is done. We're much better than them. Let's see if we give them 2 goals back, let's see what happens. And Virgil van Dijk has to pop up with another winner. So as soon as Everton scored, and it had been coming in the sense that Everton, as you say, were getting Grealish into space. They were looking dangerous. They hadn't actually created any chances, is what I would say. There weren't a string of saves from Alisson. There weren't shots flying wide. It kind of came out of nowhere in terms of actually opening Liverpool up. But the pressure had been starting to ratchet. All you heard around Anfield was, for crying out loud, with one slight twist, which is I think that if they had conceded a second Liverpool, they would have quite fancied the fact that they might have scored in injury time.
God, there was always that. Maybe that's the moral victory. We denied you a goal after the 90th minute. Maybe we'll take that straw. The goal, though, meant so bloody much, Raw. I want to be clear. There was a feeling of scoring. There was a feeling of a vague gesture of potency. Because you're right, we didn't threaten that much, really. But that moment, it felt like we can make our mark. We can be part of the game. We can make it a competition. We're not just patsies. We're not just footballing chum. And I felt both of them in that second. It's the first goal I think we scored at Anfield since 2021. When Gylfi Bloody Sigurdsson, yes I know, scored in the era of fanless football, a time so unbelievably mystical in our imagination that Carlo Ancelotti was then our coach. Yes, that did happen.
Wasn't.
It did, but
it didn't.
It was like it's in the mists of time. It's almost like something from a magical Murakami novel. It did happen. Diego Forlan once came on the show and talked to us about how scoring a goal is like an orgasm or better. And in that moment, I want to say, Diego Forlan, I thought of you, you beautiful human being. But Raw, you've already nailed the issue. 3 of the last 5 games, Liverpool have been 2-0 up, been pegged back to 2-2. What is it? Is it mental? Do they just switch off? Are they leggy? These games, 3 games a week, is it doing them? First half, though, so bloody transcendent. Second half, more a nod at being ragged, uncalibrated. How do you understand it?
Yeah, I don't, to an extent. I think the biggest thing is physical. Liverpool get tired. That seems to now be a pattern and has been across basically all of their games this season. But being in the stadium, watching it, it's really hard not to feel that at least part of it is mental. That it's, whether it's that they start to get too comfortable or whether they just have this sort of slapdash streak in their play. Because what shifted the momentum in the second half as much as anything, even before the goal, wasn't Everton being more forceful, although they were. It wasn't Everton being more decisive or more dynamic, although they were. It was the fact that Liverpool just kept giving the ball away. They had this spell of about 5 minutes where they made the wrong decision in possession every single time. And by the end, the crowd were kind of giving that Goodison-style roar of disapproval of, what are you doing? Get on with it. That wasn't born of kind of, I don't think it was a demanding noise. It wasn't, we expect better, this is Liverpool Football Club. It was more, you're getting really simple stuff wrong. And I think they did that against Bournemouth. They certainly did it against Atletico Liverpool. And they did it in spells against Everton. There's a point, I think, where we look at those spells a bit more deeply than we do at the parts where it works well. Because in that first half, Liverpool were really, really good. And that shouldn't be ignored. It's the same against Atletico Madrid. When Liverpool were on it, they hit a level that Atletico Madrid, that Everton just couldn't live with. But they do have this capacity to kind of offer a window of hope for about 5 or 10 minutes. And that, at the level they're playing at, that's too much, because teams, even an Everton side who people would look at and say, well, they're a limited team, have got some extraordinarily good footballers, and they will take advantage.
I mean, it was a delight. We were resilient, we were dogged, we were determined. I was so proud of Everton Football Club. Grealish wanted, savoured every chance to run at that Liverpool backline. Dibbling came on for his debut, really an intriguing cameo. I'm not going to lie, part of me started to feel the build, strange feelings, started to believe in Everton Football Club, started to believe in James Tarkowski too, electric boogaloo. It was tense at the end. You had the pleasure, no doubt, of watching your team actually close one out for a change. I don't want to be that guy. It was very strange officiating game to experience. There were yellows brandished at will at Everton Football Club mostly. Bradley fouled constantly. Grealish, no card. The 3 minutes of stoppage time you've already articulated in a game which I think there were 5 second half substitutions, a goal, a lot of fouls. That was a choice. But ultimately, my friend John Green texted me, massive red, said at the end, not sure if this is much consolation, but of all the Evertons we've ever beaten, this is one of the better Evertons, which was like patting me on the head in the most delicious way. But anyway, as an Everton Derby loss experience, Raw, it's one I can't be sad about because we didn't get smashed. And it's perhaps the most painful Everton modern derby loss of all. Somehow, it feels even crueler when we don't get slapped like 4-0.
But that presumably is because Liverpool create the impression that they're there to be, that there's a vulnerability, that there's a fragility, that maybe you could have got something. So just as the Gravenberch goal feels like torture because it just goes over Tarkowski's head and it just evades Pickford's fingertips, the defeat itself is more painful, because you feel as though it might not have been a defeat. And Rog, I really do my best not to be a triumphal fan. I'm not that sort of football supporter. I will take a point from basically every game that Liverpool play. I would be happy with a 38-point season. I would say, look, do you know what? They've not had any bad results. But what I would say is, in that first half, Liverpool looked a substantial level above Everton. They switched off, and Everton could have taken something at the end. They didn't after the goal. Moyes afterwards was very kind of content with the performance in the second half. I think privately he might be a little bit more cross about that, because after the goal, I'm not sure Everton had a shot on target. There was no real kind of cranking up of the pressure to test Liverpool's nerves, and I think that was the bit where there was a shortcoming. But we shouldn't ignore the fact that in that first half, Liverpool looked like an extremely good football team. So if you want to think about it in kind of the most basic terms, Liverpool were better in the first half by a bigger margin than Everton were better in the second. And I think that probably sums it up.
Yeah, and you won the Merseyside Derby as a result. Local lording it up, rights are yours, Raw. Probably more importantly, your team remained perfect. There was a team, those vulnerabilities are still there, completely evident, light of day. Pieces yet to click. Where are you on this mentally? Should the rest of us be terrified because you are perfect? So you're like, when we click, we're going to be completely in a class of our own. Or you're still like, why are they not clicking? It's going to take some time. We've really not played that many tough games yet to get cocky. There's still a savage gauntlet to come.
Yeah, whenever you look through the fixtures, you kind of all you see are obstacles, all you see are pitfalls. Crystal Palace away, pitfall. Chelsea away, pitfall. If Liverpool get to the next international break, having won all their games, I will be staggered. I do think there's an element of excitement of wondering what this team could be, and you see it in glimpses, and even in that second half, there were moments where they launched these counterattacks that just cut through Everton. And again, in the final minutes, James Tarkowski would appear out of nowhere at Florian Wirtz's feet or something. But there were signs of what they're trying to build. I think the question has to be, how long will it take? Because if it's too long, Liverpool start dropping points. If by November they're kind of up to speed and they're producing what Arne Slot wants them to produce, then I think the rest of the league probably does have a problem. If it takes much longer than that, then there's teams out there that will benefit from that.
And on the other side of the coin, your Liverpool are just 33 games away from your perfect season. And I will say a tiny, tiny, tiny part of me is very happy for you, Raw. Deep, deep, deep somewhere in my spleen. From champions to pretenders, Arsenal won, Manchester City won. Going into this weekend, this felt like a strange brew for this clash, which has oft felt like the title decider. Not this game. Going into it, Arsenal still trying to prove themselves to themselves. Manchester City, in this moment of such flux, enormous transition, neither team, you felt like wanted a win as much as they just abhorred, feared almost a narrative whip of losing. By the time they kicked off, there was that added pressure of, yes, Liverpool's fearsome pace. Loser would be half a lap behind the Alchemy Masters after just 5 games played. So both teams came in off the same 3 games a week, which is crazy in terms of the intensity. Pep went same team for 3rd Premier League game in a run, so unlike him. He said, quote, his lineup gave him good vibes, which is so unconvincing. Arteta, Arsenal had lost just once in 23 games against Big Six clubs, but that loss was against Liverpool a couple of match days ago. They had Saka, they had Eze on the bench, started with Champions League game changer Leandro Trossard. This lineup was very much about Arteta's new vaunted starters and finishers philosophy in action. Raw. Everyone's talking about it. We fans essentially agonise over who kicks off the game, but with an enormous squad, enormous options, enormous tactical flexibility. He's looked at rugby, where they can make an enormous amount of substitutions, and is now making the case that the players who finish the game, essentially who close the match, are just as important.
It's deeply depressing, Rog, how much football is learning from rugby at the moment. I feel like this is not a good thing. I don't think we should be looking at rugby as a source of inspiration, or we'll all be drinking stuff out of our shoes relatively soon.
Maybe we are.
Maybe we should be. I think the way Arteta is approaching it makes sense. He does have an enormous squad. He does have incredible depth. And you know what? There is an argument that if you've got a player like Eze, say, that he is best deployed against tired legs. That it is better to have a fully fit, fully flying Eberechi Eze for 30 minutes at a point when Ruben Diaz and Mateus Nunes and whoever else are tired than it is to throw him in from the start. You might as well use Trossard or Madueke or whoever to wear out your opponent. That's how rugby approaches it. And that type of thinking, that sort of strategic thinking, is becoming much more common in the Premier League in particular, in football in general, in the same way as everybody now sees everything as a potential set piece, because they can control the set piece, they want a set pattern, they want a clear idea of what to do. I think they're looking at kind of the game as a whole and saying, well, we don't have to start with our strongest 11. Maybe in tight games, big games against major opponents, maybe it's better to finish with your strongest 11.
Yeah, and the game began, let history remember, because there is so much fixation on the Arsenal starting 11. Arsenal dominated the early exchanges. I mean, it was confident team play. Felt, watching it for me, eerie at the time, almost too good. There's a really fantastic conversation that goes on in the Men in Blazers Discord live in Premier League games. And I wrote, and I regret this, man, because obviously this is all my fault. I wrote, Arsenal fans were loving the early exchanges. I wrote, there's going to be one moment when City are going to snap to life like The Undertaker, and Haaland is going to test that Arsenal back line, and you boys need to be ready. And I crap you not, Raw. Within bloody seconds, I felt like the guilt of Jonah in the whale. 9th minute, Haaland innocuously deep in his own half. I think 3 Arsenal players surrounded him, slipped a pass to Reinders, who just ran like the juice on the loose, drew the defenders, and then Haaland just barrel forward. It was like watching a Norwegian elk hound off his leash in the park. And his finishing has become so bloody reliable. 6th goal of the season, decisive, impact, something we see so bloody often now with this City team. Proof of the old, was it Mike Tyson who once said, Raw, that old adage, everyone has a plan until Erling Haaland punches you in the mouth.
And that was kind of in keeping with Guardiola's plan, wasn't it? It wasn't to dominate possession. He didn't go to the Emirates thinking, I can school Arsenal in how football should be played. He kind of went to the Emirates and played Arsenal at their own game. That was what it looked like Guardiola was trying to do.
Yeah, aesthetics are for losers, I think he said. I'm making it up, but that's mentally what was going on. I do want a quick word on Erling Haaland. We always have a quick word, but I don't think we can have a quick word enough, man. 6 games with Manchester City this season. It's 7 goals for Erling, 13 in 8 if you include the 5 he scored in one game for Norway. This is insane form. I think Pep's tried to talk him up, said, he's a monster up there with Ronaldo and Messi. 50 goals in the Champions League now, just at faster pace than anybody. So the question is really, why do we always still write off Haaland? We always try, it's over, it's done, flat track. I mean, we try and come up with ways to write him off, even though we're really just measuring him at this point against his own transcendent, breathless scoring clip. Why is it, Ro? Is it like he's got the charisma of a cyborg? Is it because he's like a human hammer, that his goals are seen to come from power more than kind of creative wizardry, which I think is harsh? Is it like a Manchester City discount that we tell ourselves anybody could score this much for City, which is hilarious? Is it that people don't like them, or that Pep kind of overshadows all of his own players? These numbers are they're almost fictional. Yeah, he still doesn't seem to get the love that he deserves.
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think the one thing about comparing Haaland to Messi in particular is he doesn't have the magic in his play that Messi does. You can't really... Well, I suppose it depends...
Different kind of magic.
Yeah, maybe it's a different kind of magic, but Messi is not... It's not fair to compare anyone to Messi, for a start, but, Messi would kind of do these things that you've never really seen before, whereas Haaland does things you've seen before. He just does them better than everybody else. Maybe that's the difference. I do think there's a little bit of Guardiola overshadowing it. I think City can't really have it both ways. You can't have a manager who is fated as the greatest of his generation, possibly the greatest of all time, this visionary whose brain is fizzing with so many ideas that he is constantly reinventing the game. You can't have that and then, well, actually it's all about the striker. It just doesn't fit. You have to kind of pick your poison to an extent, I suppose. So maybe if Haaland wasn't playing in a Guardiola team, he would get more... Maybe there's a certain amount of credit to go around, Rog, and Guardiola kind of monopolises that credit, and so his players get less of it. City have always been sort of angered whenever one of their players hasn't won, a PFA Player of the Year award or a Footballer of the Year award or the Ballon d'Or. But you kind of think, well, why would they win the votes when we're constantly being told it's all because of their manager? There is a kind of coherent inner logic there, I think. But also at the same time, I'm not sure that we do undervalue Haaland. I think Haaland is one of the most celebrated footballers of his generation, as he should be. The biggest thing maybe is that we've kind of got used to him scoring at a ridiculous rate of knots. That we just
do something else, Haaland.
Yeah, well, no, it's as things are.
Write a play, and then
exactly.
What you're saying.
Yeah, write me a sonnet, Erling, and then we'll see who gets praise. No, I think we expect Erling Haaland to score a ridiculous number of goals. That's kind of what his job is. We are spoiled, and there is part of us that is maybe more inclined to look out for a dip in his scoring rate than to continually express amazement at what is an extraordinary scoring rate.
It is extraordinary, and it's remarkable to marvel. It's almost so many goals. I don't think the human brain is able to truly celebrate what we are witnessing week on week on week. That focus, that consistency, that power, that clinicality, that physical. I mean, it's really true. It is. Other than Shaquille O'Neal breaking into the NBA and just smashing backboards, I have never seen anything like it. And I bet you Haaland can shoot free throws too. But from that point on, Pep Guardiola did something really, truly remarkable. Pulled pretty well everybody back, bar like Doku on the break. 5-4-1 crouch. Arsenal were not ready for this. I don't think anyone was ready for this. They had a Zubimendi, Rice, Marino midfield. It was actually meant to be the muscle to stop the very goal they just conceded. God bless them, they didn't wilt. Even though you could hear the breath taken out of the Emirates, they tried to exert themselves. I thought Noni Madueke was again quite impressive. Also impressive, Kuzanov for City. It was very much like Charles Atlas, who got sand kicked in his face on the beach and turned himself into the muscle-bound wonder who changed working out, even for the likes of Rory Smith. So he could bully the bullies. Kuzanov was a meme when he arrived last season. He's been bloody locked down, taking names, kicking Arsenal ass. Arsenal's response, I'd find that under well-intended rule. Pep may have his starters and finishers, but he also needs starters who can finish. They seem super blunt-edged, or was it this that City made them look blunt-edged?
The thing that strikes me about Arsenal and has done for a year or two now is actually it's a sentiment that a colleague of mine, Ian Ladyman, who works for the Daily Mail, summed up. He said their need is too naked. Arsenal feels slightly too quick to panic. Everything is too urgent. Everything is rushed. It all feels like it means far too much. And what happened on Sunday, I think, was that City got an early goal, and that always presents, a home team that are favourites with a challenge. And the challenge is, do you not only have the kind of invention to get back in this game, but have you got the patience and the nerve to do it? And certainly in that first half, it felt to me like Arsenal didn't quite have the nerve. They were flustered, is probably the best way of putting it. They looked really flustered by the fact that they weren't winning. And I think that's true of Arsenal more often than it should be. And it's the one thing that I would maybe suggest Arteta could have got better in the last couple of years, is to retain that composure a bit more.
Flustered, naked in their need, unable to really give Gyökeres any kind of foothold in the game. One Madueke flinty smash smothered by Donnarumma, 67% possession. But honestly, not a lot created with it at half-time. It did feel like a massive 45 minutes coming up for Arsenal and their fans. For the entire Arteta project, to be candid, at home against a wounded Manchester City, with the memory of the Liverpool loss still lingering. With so many options, I felt going into the second half, he had to get this right. This finishers and starters concept, this had to go right here, right now. So massive changes at the break. Mourinho hooked for Eze, the excellent Saka back for the first time in a month out with hamstring knack to replace the admittedly quite impressive Madueke. Their impact immediate. Lovely strike by Eze, smashing one at Donnarumma. Got to credit Donnarumma, man. There's a massively forgotten television series, a little television show used called Game of Thrones. It reminds me of The Mountain in that show. And one MIB Discord user wrote that City are now essentially tactically just a big boy at the back and a big boy at the front. You do a lot with big boy tactics. We know Donnarumma may not be that good with his feet, the Pep kind of feet footballer, but my God, as a shot stopper, Raw, watching him seem to get stronger and stronger, punching every cross further and further away, ever more derisively. Reminded me of like Peter Cech in his prime with Chelsea, when they used to say about him, felt like Chelsea always started with a 1-0 lead because he was such a dominant factor. That's Donnarumma.
Yeah, 100%. He's made a colossal difference, Donnarumma, even in the space of 3 games since he arrived. And partly, it's his shot stopping, it's his command of his area, it's all those basics of what goalkeepers are kind of meant to do first and foremost. But it's also the second order effect. That's the big thing with Donnarumma. City looked so confident in defence. They look like they know they have an enormous man standing behind them who will only concede a goal if something very unusual, something very special happens. And I think City haven't had that for 2 or 3 years. It's not just the start of the season thing. I think that Edison was a revolutionary, transformational goalkeeper, but his aura had started to wane a little bit a year, 18 months before he left. City now look like they don't believe they're going to concede any goals, and that is an extraordinary difference.
And because of him, they don't need possession. I think they had, 33%? Lowest previous under Pep was 36.5. This was remarkable what we were seeing. Pep Guardiola plays so deeper even than the love that Jordan Hudson carries for Bill Belichick. It's so bloody deep. Haaland was essentially like an auxiliary centre-half at times. Raya was pretty much camped in his own centre circle for huge parts of the second half, like a box-to-box midfielder. Haaland had one more chance on the break. Let history remember that. After Eze cleared badly, rumbled in once more. I think you could hear just a ripped tide of Arsenal fans' sphincters suddenly puckering and clenching. It was audible all around the world. It was not particularly nice to listen to, but Raya strong on this occasion. It's crazy watching that City backline just high-fiving each other after every single challenge, like a second-tier team in the FA Cup. Was it the clock hits 90? It was almost like an homage to Jose Mourinho's football at times. They took off Haaland. I think they played, 5 centre-backs, 2 holding midfielders? Arsenal had 37 touches in the City box. City had just 5 in theirs. Arsenal 472 passes. Manchester City of Pep Guardiola 196. This is surreal. I need to ask you, I thought like Nathan Fielder was going to appear in the Manchester City box and show us that he's filming season 3 of his television show. But is it that Pep, ultimately, who we've hailed constantly as the man who transformed English football, is it that we got it wrong? Did English football actually transform Pep Guardiola?
Yeah, it's easy to look at that and think maybe Pep has decided we were right all along, and actually what you need is a big fella at the back, big fella up front, and who really cares about what happens in between? Transfer the ball as fast as possible from the large man at the back to the large man at the front. To be honest, this sounds really willfully counterintuitive. I'm not sure this is that out of character for Pep. The way that Guardiola has always seen football is that he is looking for a competitive edge. He has been really clear that the reason he plays that kind of or has always played that beautiful possession-based model of football. It's just that's what wins. That's how you win games. It's how you control games. It's what you need to do to win the trophies that Guardiola wants to win. And I think he has now seen that there is a different way, that maybe because that is the dominant mode of football, that to have a competitive edge again, he has to try something different. He's always done this occasionally. I remember being at a game between his Bayern Munich team and Borussia Dortmund at Signal Iduna Park in maybe 2014, and Bayern went long. They went long over the Jurgen Klopp press because that was the way to avoid it. So Guardiola will do it. He has always done it. What I've not seen before is quite that many defenders, and I wonder if that is actually kind of just testament to how much City needed to not lose the game at Arsenal.
I think so. I mean, it's like we do know football is all about reaction and counter-reaction. Pep's always one step ahead, hence the man giving us tiki-taka now, giving us like slippy slapper. But honestly, watching him, listening to him post-game also, as he like defended it, it's almost like this is a man who's like bored of aesthetics, control, passing. He's almost like obsessed with a new challenge. How do I win with muscle? Give me a new challenge. I mean, he is, in a way, like a polymath. You think of like, you hear about Leonardo da Vinci being like, yes, the artist, also the inventor, or like modern like Queen guitarist Brian May, just an elite globally renowned guitarist. Also, like, what is he, like an astrophysicist? It's like Pep wants to be, I'm the guy that did this, I'm also the guy that did that. Because do you remember that first season when he arrived in English football and he was so confused by our adoration almost, our celebrating of physicality? They got beaten, was it by Leicester? And afterwards, in that press conference post-game, he was so angry. He said, I don't train the tackles. What are tackles? I mean, you watch this game, you're like, he's learned.
Or maybe that is what's happening. Maybe that Guardiola came in as the great disruptor of English football. He kind of proved that a lot of the things we told ourselves about ourselves were wrong. And so what's become kind of the dominant mode of thought is this sort of Pep style of football. And he's such a natural repeat disruptor that he's decided he wants to prove all that wrong as well. Maybe there is an element of, I'm going to show you I can win however I want and you can't stop me. Maybe this is the final act. I have a slightly different interpretation, Rog.
Go on.
I think Guardiola is in win now mode. The signing of Donnarumma, more than anything, reminded me of Robin van Persie signing for Manchester United in 2012. That was Alex Ferguson taking his rival's best player, regardless of how he fitted into the system, because it weakened a rival and it just made his team impossible to stop. He won the lead that season, Manchester United's last title in 2013, and he retired. Ferguson, looking in its hindsight to an extent, but the Van Persie signing was all about Ferguson saying, right, I don't have time to mess about anymore. We're going to win the Premier League this season.
I agree with this, by the way. Miguel Delaney's written that Manchester City are essentially at the end of their Catalan cycle with like Bergistan leaving in the front office and Pep one eye to his own exit. This is like, I need this last flourish. Doesn't matter how. No one will remember. Let's do this stuff.
Yeah, it has that air because Donnarumma is a non-Pep signing. I don't think deep down Pep Guardiola wants to be playing the sort of football he played at Arsenal. I like the idea that he's disrupting his own logic. I think that is appealing. But just as Guardiola's the only manager in history who's ever lost a game because he was trying to be too clever, I'm not sure that Guardiola is challenging himself. I'm not sure that he is pushing the paradigm. I think he just wants to win something this season, and so he is prepared to do literally whatever it takes. Because that performance yesterday reminded me more than anything else of the man who is the kind of anti-Guardiola. That was Jose Mourinho. That was Jose Mourinho in charge of Manchester City.
Yeah, and God bless, let's judge it. I think, Pep always tries to get his team to peak around November, December. We need to wait to judge it until then, and your theory. But it made for a bit of an eyesore. Highlight of the game, honestly, was in that stalemate spell, was the magical moment between Bernardo Silva and Trossard. Two elite professionals, two vaunted internationals, two dads, two grown men deciding to trade nut shots, chucking the ball at each other's down belows as if they were just like kids on the schoolyard and not, title chasers playing a game with 100 cameras on their every move rule.
Sometimes you got to hit an opponent in the nuts. That's just, it's football, Rog.
Tactics. Yeah, I'm sure, by the way.
What these nut shots? I don't train the nut shots.
By the way, no Pep in this current heel mode. He probably does train the nut shots. He's like, okay, guys, it is time for nutshot training. Better, the perfect. I mean, I was in seeking perfection, and then I sought how to change the cargo pant for 2 seasons, and now I'm perfecting the nutshot. I will say, somewhere in Russia, the man who invented that slap fighting was like writing down, oh my God, footballing nutshot fighting. It is the future. I'd watch that, Root.
We all would. We would watch 90 minutes of nutshots.
Give the people what they want. By the way, if Arsenal hadn't scored, we would not be talking about the nutshots. We'd be talking about the scorn which we'd be heaping on Arteta in enormous portions. But then the moment, 93rd minute, Eberici Eze, just inside his own half, looked up, saw Martinelli surging and just unleashed a long bomb, the light of which could only really come off the arm of one Josh Allen. Went over the back line, switched off for a second, football that game of margins, and Gab Martinelli. My God, it had to be him. God bless him. Controlled the ball stunningly. And then that rainbow that came off his foot over the giant Donnarumma. It's not like me to be hyperbolic, Raw, but in that moment, I did feel like we were watching a version of the biblical David slaying Goliath with his slingshot. It dropped the ball from those nighttime skies in delicious slow motion, bounced forever, and crawled over that line, and it made it feel all the more just emotionally resounding.
And what's so satisfying about that goal, Rog, is how instinctive it is. There's no time for Martinelli to think, to calculate, to quantify what do I need to do here. He knows. He knows as he is bursting through the two central defenders, as he's splitting the central defence with that run. He knows he gets one shot, he has one type of touch. He can kind of subconsciously shift the way he flicks the ball so that the spin takes it over the line into the corner at slow motion. He gets everything right. That the speed of that calculation is extraordinary. It was such a wonderful goal to watch.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, how do I defang the big man? That would have been what his brain would have had to compute in that very second. And I'm so happy it was him. I mean, I will say, celebration police were out in force, mocking Arsenal for how they revelled in the moment. I've got to say, sod that. I understand it. Celebrate. I mean, God, if you can't celebrate moments of joy in football, what has life become? We're celebrating also relief for Mikel Arteta, that enormous squad, that enormous sense of tactical promise, floundering. There would have been some darkness, mark my words, if they had lost here after losing at Liverpool. Quite undeserved, by the way, this early in the season. But the pile-on would have been, oh my God, just a roar. That rugby, it would have been mocked, the rugby starters and the finishers, but it worked on this day. I do need to say I'm so bloody happy for Gab Martinelli. He scored midweek, was it 36 seconds after he came on in the Champions League, and now this. He's been through a darkness. To witness him experiencing the light is so bloody beautiful. Declan Rice said post-game, a lot of players would have sulked on the bench. Every time he comes on, he shows heart and desire. There's a lesson for life in there. We've talked about City, though, big picture. Raw, I do need to hear you talk about Arsenal. Listen, for us, I think, neutrals, it's a draw in which Liverpool were really the only winners. But for Arsenal, reprieve. Number 2, joy in Reece Witherspoon's home, which is not nothing. I think the statistical note that Mikel Arteta is the first manager ever to not lose in 5 league games in a row against Pep Guardiola is a small little thing, but a nice little thing. But the autopsies of this game, I think they probably will bellow through the week. There'll be a sense of, was there caution which we rue at the beginning? Should we have played Eze for the whole game? Is that the new reality for Arteta, that we're looking at this man now suddenly with so many choices, so much depth, that massive squad, that so many egos to manage, a new challenge for him, it's got to be said, as is still winning that title, something he still needs to prove that he needs to do. And this season needs to prove he can beat a massive team without caution.
But that's it, isn't it? It's the fact that, yeah, they've got a great squad, they've spent a huge amount of money, all that stuff that Pep Guardiola kind of highlighted before the game. But the principal source of pressure on Arsenal is that it's their turn now. They have to get over the line. There is that sense among that's not kind of a troublemaking journalist saying it, coming up with this kind of false way of judging.
It's a motto, new heights, or whatever. There can only be one height. Seconds that you can. When you say new heights, it's their mission.
It only means one thing. There is a sense at Arsenal at the moment, and it can be constructive and it can be destructive, that they have to win this season. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Premier League. It could be the Champions League. They need a major trophy. They need something to show from this era. And in that sense, yeah, the joke here, as well as in the US, was that Arsenal drew 1-1 with City and Liverpool won. I think that's a big result for Arsenal.
Less funny than you think.
But I think it's a big result for Arsenal. I think but to me, it's a big result for Arsenal because the alternative was so serious that we talked about the kind of how naked their need is at the moment. If they'd lost that game, there was a chance that Arsenal, 5 matches into the season, would have been on the verge of like an existential crisis. That they would have 6 points behind Liverpool, losing the momentum to City. They'd be behind Spurs in the table. All that stuff. It would suddenly feel as though this season that was meant to be the culmination yet again was falling apart early on. As it is, they have rescued that. There was a feeling of indomitability, at least, I suppose, about snatching the draw. The test is next weekend. They're away at Newcastle next weekend. That game is really important because the way the season has started for Arsenal is partly to do with the fixtures. They've played Liverpool and City 2 out of 3 games. They now need to stay in touch. They need to start ratcheting up the pressure on Liverpool. They need to start feeling as though they are to be taken seriously. If they drop more points, then you get back to that kind of sense of existential dread that is the one thing that could really, I think, hold Arsenal back this season.
Keep believing and don't read Moby Dick, lads, and everything is going to be okay. Irrespective, this game now, a reminder of why football is so bloody magnificent, because it does make us feel so alive. From one side of Manchester to the other, back to Saturday, Manchester United 2, Chelsea 1. How do you respond to a 3-0 shellacking in the Manchester Derby? If you're Ruben Amorim, you announce not even the Pope could get him to change his system at United. Well, this comment, it did me, not going to lie a little bit, because I love the Pope. Man is so human. He's also a White Sox fan. There's leaders of religious movements who do know their football, like Ange Postecoglou, for instance, right? But even contemplating listening to the Pope for football tactical advice, which that insinuates, it's like going to a doctor when you need advice on a good wine.
Do you know, that hadn't occurred to me. Does the previous Pope, Leo, is that the previous Pope?
Messi.
No, what was the old Pope called? I can't remember.
Yeah.
The Argentinian
Leo.
Pope. Was it Pope Leo?
Yeah, Pope Leo.
He was genuinely a massive fan. He was a San Lorenzo member, his hometown team in Argentina. And I'm not sufficiently well versed in Catholicism, Rog, to have updated my mental map of who is the Pope. But I kind of had it in my head when he said it, that he'd be asking the Argentinian Pope, the one who knew about tactics, who might say, well, look, Ruben, you've been a bit Menotti, you need to be more Bilardo. That's fine. I can imagine the old Pope saying that. Pope Bobby, this one, he's not offering any advice at all, is he? So maybe Ruben Amorim was laughing at the British media, the punditocracy, the commentariat, by saying the Pope couldn't convince me to change my mind. But he meant that's because the Pope is a baseball fan and knows nothing about football. Maybe if it had been a more football fluent Pope, he'd be willing to listen. Yeah,
but it's Pope Francis, right? Pope Leo's the current one.
It's Pope Leo the current one, so it's Pope Francis. I mean, as I say, who the Pope is takes a while to update in my head.
Yeah, you listen to Pope Leo if you need to know whether you should change the pitcher when there's 2 batters on.
But Pope Francis will tell you whether you should invert your wingers. Right? Fine.
Yeah. You got to get your. So essentially, what we're saying, Ruben, is you got to get the right Pope for the job. But luckily, enter Chelsea, a team for all their Club World Cup title patches, hadn't won at Old Trafford since 2013. I say sadly, Alejandro Garnacho didn't start on his return to Manchester United. Maresca, clearly the last person in football to hear about the new McTominay rule, which says that a player leaving Old Trafford experiences the on-field equivalent of a new manager bounce. Didn't have long to contemplate it though, because 5 minutes in, panic on the streets of Manchester, long ball flicked on by Šeško to a charging full bore, and Boomo with his quite delicious cute elite dad bod. Out came Sanchez from his goal. I'll say Sanchez's decision making is often on the road not taken, is what I'd say. He went kung fu fighting, took out the Cameroonian, immediately sent off, red card in the rain. Maresca, I think, Raw later said the truth, that it's better to concede the goal, stay at 11 men and chase the 1-0 down, than go red card, go down to 10 men with 85 long minutes still to play.
And he's quite right with the one slight problem that Robert Sanchez, it wasn't kind of a last gasp, I'm doing this to save the team from conceding. It was a wild swipe to try and clear a ball that wasn't there. I don't think Robert Sanchez was engaged in what could be described as a conscious thought process.
You think we used to play rugby and we used to get battered at my school, and it's sometimes so cold that we'd all try and get like slightly injured so we'd come off. And it was such a crazy decision. Part of it was just like, yeah, do you think, Robert Sanchez just wants to, he doesn't fancy it.
Doesn't want to be wet.
Yeah, it's just not that arse. Let me go. Yeah,
as someone who'd walked around in that rain, fair enough.
Yeah, you had Curry burning inside you, Rory, and he didn't. That was the difference. By the way, I wanted Chelsea to sub in Garnacho in goal, but Maresca went Jurgensen, took off both Estevao and Neto. Really the two creative speeder threats, and the expectation suddenly shifted from Discord. Mouliate immediately asked the real question right then and there, said, how will United manage to lose this? I was like, don't be negative. You're almost right though, Mouliate. 14th minute, Mbumo the creator, Dorgo headed cross back, Bruno quick to react. Onside by the proverbial toenail, stabbed home, 19th man to 100 goals for United, and that's why you don't listen to the Pope roar. Maresca carried on his subs, made 3 by the 21st minute, reacted to the goal by yanking Cole Palmer, a bit like in chess terms, sacrificing your queen. Palmer left pointing at his groin. I'd say that this Palmer thing was fascinating because keyboard warriors went crazy with these 3 substitutions, instantly just blazing Maresca. There was one at Seb C who said quite darkly and quite morbidly, Ocean Gate made better subs than Maresca, but the net effect was this game that we were promised, we were told it would be, we went to see a horror movie for United. Suddenly it felt like a rom-com. Chelsea's day got longer and longer. Set piece, not cleared by broken defenders all over the show. Enzo weak, James lost. Jorgensen strangely rooted to his line. Just say Chelsea and goalkeepers. Just a strange self-inflicted blind spot of recruitment. And it was Luke Shaw. He leapt like there was free pie available. It was like leapt like an English Michael Jordan. Ball fell in a ruck to Casemiro. The celebrations in that moment were so outsized. So it was almost like a psychic release. Manchester United happiness is possible.
But they exist on the edge, Manchester United, at all times. They are, and they have been for 2 years, 12 years, I don't know, like a long time. They must feel even as players as though the world's about to collapse on their heads at literally every given moment. So suddenly, yet again, they went into that game, question marks over Amorim, question marks over the direction of the club, this feeling of kind of mounting crisis. And then, to be honest, the entire world arranged itself in their favour. Robert Sanchez makes a mad decision, Chelsea makes some strange substitutions, and United looked comfortable. They looked like they're going to get a win in a big game, admittedly in weird circumstances, and that must feel more than anything like intense relief for the players.
Yeah, Chelsea had nothing to give in that moment apart from, all their creative players off. The only joy was to watch Cucurella just go full on damp poodle in the rain. But then, stroke of half-time, human cube Casemiro decided, I don't know how else to describe it, he decided to hump Santos. It was a pointless ticky-tacky foul, already on the yellow. And suddenly, hello, hope it's me, Margaret, in this Waterworld game. It was 10 versus 10 slush bowl. No Garnacho for Chelsea, you cowards. Must have been nice for him in a way, just nostalgia, sitting on the bench again at Old Trafford. Down the stretch though, just exhaustion, players gassed, mud bowl, United drenched, delirious. Ruben Amorim's team tried to let Chelsea back. It was Chalobah scored with 10 minutes to go, but they didn't have the legs to drag themselves back in. Touch on Chelsea very quickly. I'm shocked, unbeaten now in the league no more. I'm old enough to remember when they became Club World Cup champions and were unbeaten. But Enzo Maresca, all the joy of what he's given this club just seems to have been eviscerated. Well, there's a real feeling growing amongst the Chelsea hardcore fan base that the struggle in Europe combined with this loss, the way he moves tactically, the decisions he makes here embodied by his substitutions, the sense that this man doesn't fit the Chelsea DNA, doesn't understand the Chelsea DNA. How do you understand it, and do you agree?
Well, he's likely to be Chelsea manager very briefly and get a massive payoff. So I would suggest he does perfectly understand the Chelsea DNA, to be honest. Yeah, there's definitely sort of a disconnect, a discomfort. There's something not quite right. It's a jigsaw piece that doesn't quite fit together. It's kind of been shoehorned in because it looks roughly the same and you can't quite see the outline. it's been a bad week for Maresca. There are now sort of rumblings that maybe the club's hierarchy aren't quite as enamoured of him as they might be. And it did feel at Old Trafford in the rain, despite that slightly late kind of gathering of purpose from Chelsea that almost, in a different world, might have got them a point. It did feel a little bit like maybe the mantle of crisis was being passed from one Old Trafford dugout to the other. Because obviously it's the Premier League, so someone's got to be in crisis at all times, Rog.
We've got to feel better about ourselves somehow, Will.
Yeah, and you can kind of see that Chelsea, with a couple more disappointing results, given the outlay, given the size of the squad, given the fractiousness of the egos involved, you do wonder if maybe in a month's time or so there are fairly major question marks over Maresca.
Yeah, a lot of players with a lot of agents briefing a lot of journalists. It's a very, very, very hard club to control the narrative around. But the biggest win for Old Trafford and the ownership there on the day was no leaks in the roof, even with that rain, Raw. First back-to-back wins at home in a year, which is just a killer brutal stat in its own right. Had the joy of the whole Stretford end uniting to sing against Alejandro Garnacho with a chant that I cannot say on a child-friendly show. Reprieve, Brentford, Sunderland to come. No Champions League, no Europa League as distractions. Should we feel a glimmer of hope, Raw, that the 3-4-3 works, or are we like asterisk? It works only against 10 men in conditions akin to like a foam party in Ibiza.
Yeah, I mean, it would be weird, I think, to like take this as a sign that United have discovered a tactical brilliance that had been hidden. I mean, the fact that the opposition had their goalkeeper sent off after 5 minutes does tend to help. But, Rog, I guess what they need is a spark, and maybe this was the spark. And I'm inclined to wait.
Not to go all Bruce Springsteen on your asses.
Yeah, like I think those things can turn in weird circumstances, and one thing can lead to another, which could be salvation for Amorim, for United. But I think at this stage, it's probably too early to tell.
The Amorim redemption narrative would be so humanly remarkable to experience. But let's go way down south. Brighton 2, Tottenham 2. Spurs who opened so brightly. I think they had like 72% in the opening exchanges, just charging down the left through Udogie and Odebear. So, of course, on Brighton's very first attack, Tottenham concede a goal. Honestly, it was like a big Ange-era tribute. It was Yakuba Minte able to sprint beyond the highest of high lines from the centre circle in on goal. Then the young Swede Yari just swooped on a poor clearance from Bergvall, took a speculative shot and thundered the ball right through the wrists of a quite unready, quite unsuspecting Vicario. Spurs, who conceded 1 goal in the league all season, suddenly 2 down. But last year, Spurs had gone 2 up in this game, ended up losing 3-2, and here they admirably came back to life. A real fight. Richarlison pulled them back. I'll just say, Spurs fans, I don't know how you don't love Richarlison like Everton fans love Richarlison. Come for the shithousery. Stick around for the occasional goal slapped in off the goalkeeper's body. Second half, Spurs flung on Xavi Simons and Brennan Johnson, ratcheted up the pressure, and Brighton finally relented. I think it was John Paul van Hecke kneeing the ball and sighted into his own net. Incredible stat rule. Since the start of their first Premier League season, 2017-18, the quite enigmatic and wondrously inconsistent Brighton have conceded more own goals than any other side in the league, 20. Is that just a freak, or is that a product of hard work on the training ground?
Yeah, they're really working at it. They want to excel in every... maybe there's something in Tony Bloom's data that says that if you score lots of own goals, you succeed more. I think it's probably a consequence of how they play. But what it does kind of illustrate the truth about Brighton, which is they are fun to watch. If you were an unattached fan, like a floating voter at this stage, and you asked your Premier League supporting friends, who should I follow? The correct answer is probably Brighton. You will enjoy it the most. They always play an attractive style. They're kind of open. They're chaotic. There's always exciting players to watch. There's a sense that you're seeing the future play out today. Brighton are probably the best value fan in soccer.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. They are. Everybody has that friend who does that crazy, dangerous stuff. And you can just like vicariously enjoy it as they just recklessly light their farts. You know, when it snows, take all their clothes off and fling themselves willingly into a snowbank. You know, crazy nights out. They're just always up in the ante. That's Brighton.
They're Premier League Bam Margera. That's what they are.
Up the seagulls and meet him. Talking of Spurs, Postecoglouites assemble. Burnley won. Nottingham Forest won. After losing to Arsenal last weekend, sweet big Ange Postecoglou was asked when we'd see Forest play with a more Ange ball style. And he just said, Wednesday, mate. His team proceeded to crap the bed on Wednesday with the chaos of a Carabao defeat to second-tier Swansea City. So roll on Saturday. And I say Forest did make good or goodish on Ange's words. We saw flickers of a Forest buccaneering style that is kind of trademark Postecoglou. Burnley, like the other promoted sides, none of whom lost this weekend. They are tenacious, though. Fought their way back into this. But bad news, Forest winless now in 3 under the Postecoglouite Pope. Signs of change, I'd say evident, glimmering, even though it kind of feels big picture raw. Forest was superlative under Nuno. It kind of feels very Cinderella post-pumpkin, post-ball. They're back to this harsher world where like scraping a point at Burnley is like success.
You wonder whether Postecoglou might suffer a little bit with a false comparison, don't you? That last season was a little bit of a freak. Everything, not that they didn't deserve it, but everything that could have gone Forest's way kind of went Forest's way last season. Everything worked. Nuno had that golden touch. It's unlikely that any manager would be able to replicate that. I don't think Nuno could have replicated that. But it does mean that what Postecoglou has to do to succeed is way higher than maybe it ought to be.
Stop taking the poison chalices, Big Ange. We love you. We love you. Watching this Nottingham Forest back down to earth season is not one I want to witness. Talking about very, very back down to earth. West Ham 1, Crystal Palace 2. God bless the thousands of West Ham fans who gathered to protest against the club's board, demanding new leadership. I watched that club. It's just like, I was an Everton fan. I'm a little bit there, but for the grace of God, really, and the grace of the new owners. I mean, their misery is like snow falling on snow because they made the mistake. Those fans of protesting and then actually going to the game. Which was the same old crap. I mean that absolutely. 7 of the 12 goals that West Ham have conceded in the Premier League this season have come from corners. You think that fake quote about insanity. It's not fate when it comes to the Hammers. God bless Bowen, did net an equaliser, which was false hope, because West Ham can't have nice things unless Nuno or Gary O'Neill steps in, which will make, I hope, I pray different, because Tyreek Mitchell punished them in the 68th minute. That ball dropped out the air. He was totally unmarked, rifled it into the net. I'll say Palace, 17 games unbeaten, are probably the model of upward momentum that West Ham fans feel should be theirs now. But no, they're in the bottom 3. Potter had half of last season. He was meant to change things with a pre-season, but the struggle seems all the realer. I'll say this, Raw. Graham Potter is now the Ruben Amorim of Graham Potters. That's the stage we're in. I think they're 19th in the Premier League, 3 points in 4 games. And it doesn't seem fixable. It doesn't seem sustainable. It's more than the manager, isn't it, Rob?
Yeah, it's way more than the manager. And they are, ultimately he will pay the price for it. Potter will get sacked and they will replace him with Nuno or with Gary O'Neill or with Rafa Benitez or whoever it might be. And then they will eventually run through this thing again because there's an existential futility at West Ham. They are, I think, the only club in the top flight in the Premier League who don't really have an animating purpose at the moment. They're not trying to stand for something. They're not aiming for a specific target. They're not kind of an avatar for a way of playing or a way that you approach football, as say Brighton or Bournemouth are, or Brentford. They're not kind of representative of an area like Palace. There's no real reason for West Ham at the moment, and I think when a club gets in that situation, it can be incredibly dangerous.
Stale breath, malaise, United. Fulham 3. Brentford, beautiful Brentford 1, West London Derby, which has turned into Fulham's Arsenal outcasts against Brentford's Liverpool cast-offs, and it was won by Arsenal's B team. Alex Iwobi ran the game this season. Honestly, feels like the new Brentford boss, Keith Andrews, feels like he has his job optics renewed almost on a game-by-game basis. Godspeed to them. Bournemouth 0, Newcastle 0. Eddie Howe and Bournemouth, just an eternal love affair. The once king of the cherries, now back on his old manor. Howe has not won at the Vitality. It's kind of incredible. On 6 previous games here, again, it occurred is Toon, clipped by Barcelona on a rare Thursday Champions League game. That brutally quick turnaround probably did for them. And then that long, by English standards, journey down to the south coast to face the War Cherries meant Howe rotated heavily, left Guimaraes, Joe Linton and Elanga on the bench, conceded the ball to beautiful Bournemouth. And honestly, they don't really want that ball. They're normally reactive. He dared them to do something. It was a frustrating stalemate. And probably the biggest tribute to Bournemouth this season is that a Champions League calibre club came and just set up to blunt them. Held on for their third consecutive 0-0 on the road. 270 minutes of goalless football for Newcastle away from home. Highlight of the game, Raw, watching my friend Tyler Adams, who's listed at 5'9", being given the marking job for 6'6" Nick Volsamada on corners. It was like big man versus big man mentality. God bless you, kids. Remember, you can't account for the Wappingers falls vertical. It is. I don't know how you stop him, but they did stop him.
At some point, you just have to accept that the other person is taller than you and adjust accordingly. That's a fair enough challenge for Tyler Adams to take.
That's how I handle podcasting in public with Rory Smith. Sunderland won. Still high. Aston Villa won. Aston Villa finally scored a big boy goal. 400 minutes of football into the Premier League season. Matty Cash entered the quite savage drought with a thundering strike well outside the box, straight through the keeper's hands to give Villa their first lead of the season. It would last for mere minutes. Sunderland are absolutely full of perseverance, and it was Wilson Isidore, again, third home goal in 3 home games, making it 1-1. Raw. Emery, clearly frustrated, called his players lazy, shook hands, walked down the tunnel while the game was still going, scurried down. Side remain without a league win this season. They are Villa in modern name only. I mean, they seem like a shadow of themselves. They're almost moving from a Champions League aspirational side to Exhibit A of how financial fair play can completely kneecap a side and leave that ambition deflated like a balloon. It's really hard to watch.
Yeah, I don't have that much sympathy with that view, Rog, if I'm completely honest, because whilst Villa, are right in thinking that the financial situation that they got themselves into has held them back this season, that it has put a bit of a crimp on their ambitions, you don't then have to not win any games. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can say, oh, well, we can't win the league, so we're not going to bother trying to win any matches at all.
Purists.
There's something else has happened at Villa. There is something else, something deeper has gone wrong. For Emery to be saying such sort of stark things about his players is quite eye-catching. The lack of energy and enthusiasm and dynamism and all those things that you associated with Villa last season and the season before, that's all disappeared, and that is not to do with the fact that that their wages to turnover ratio was 91% last season.
What do you say? Is this the Emery death rattle, aka quiet quitting, that was it?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so, because I think Emery sees Villa as a club that can compete at absolutely the other end of the table. But something has happened, I think. My sense is that they've kind of talked themselves into a slide, effectively. That if you give footballers, a lot of people will tell you this within the game, that if you give players excuses, the players may well take them. If you offer them a way out and say, well, look, if you lose the game, it's not really your fault, it's because of PSR, then the players will be like, well, we can't win this game because of PSR. But that's not actually true, is it? The accountants aren't lining up for Sunderland. They're not in the wall.
Who beat you? Was it Sunderland? No, it was H&R Block. It is fascinating. And any parents listening, you can substitute children for footballers if you give them an excuse, ... Managing is just parenting at the end of the day. And Wolves 1, Leeds United 3. Oh,
result of the weekend, Rog.
It was, and it was magnificent. 5th straight league defeat for Wolves. But let's praise Leeds. They had Noah Okafor, Anton Stash, and sweet Dominic Calvert-Lewin scoring their first goals for the club. Big, lovely Dom. Netting for the first time since January, only the second time in the last 12 months. His header, it was like witnessing the broken boy be glued back together. I loved it. Wolves fans protested the ownership. In the week after the board gave Vitor Pereira a new 3-year deal despite the points after the points completely drying up. Their play has currently 2 major problems: can't defend, self-inflicting goals given up. They have very little cutting edge. Scored the first here and then just collapsed under the slightest pressure and stopped playing. the only good news I could offer Wolves fans right now is that, yes, slow start last season. I don't think you won any of your first 10 games, but then cruised to mid-table. Please God, you will be able to repeat that process. We will see. Letter from a GFOP, John Daly, Rog and Rory, as I believe I'm the only fan of Wolverhampton in the United States. That can't be true. Do I stick with them or take a look for a team that won't let me down all season? I'm thinking Everton. Thoughts? John, Raw, this was a real letter.
So the problem that I think Wolves have, and this is not going to make John feel any better, I saw someone describe Wolves as being an experiment of what happens if every season you sell your best players and replace them with worse ones. And I think what we are seeing now is the answer. I talked about Villa, something going wrong at Villa in terms of ambition. It feels like something the same thing has happened at Wolves, that there is a lack of purpose to that club. They have been drifting for 2 or 3 years. You mentioned, Roger, the fact they didn't win any of their first 10 games last season, and then they got out of it. If you keep trying to pull that trick, at some point it will catch up with you. So John, I fear, may not be able to add to his American Wolves army anytime soon.
God bless. It's what happens when you have ownership which really specialises in gypsum mining. But John, your letter, bit terrifying. Let me ask you a personal direct question. Do you like to live by the words of that great 13th century Persian philosopher Rumi? The wound is the place where the light enters you. If you say, yes, I do love that, welcome to the blues, my friend. Raw, what a show. We've covered a lot of ground, but let's close it with delve into our bulging mailbag time. This letter, I think, is from Sarah Bentner from Colorado Springs. What a town. Raw, do the honours.
Is that in Colorado? Or is this a Kansas City type vibe?
No, this is proper, really proper Colorado. It's beautiful.
So Sarah writes, Rog and Raw, listening to you is the highlight of my week. You guys worked so hard on your football, but you also know a lot about life. I think this letter, Rog, is not for us. I don't know how you do it, but it's inspiring. As a sophomore in college, don't know what that is, I am starting to think serious thoughts about my serious future and would love to know how you both got to do what you do. Was it something you always dreamed of and pursued with the passion Beto dedicates to fulfilling his dream of one day being a professional footballer? And whether you would recommend we follow in your footsteps and become soccer journalists? As Rilke wrote in Letters to a Young Poet, can you tell us letters to a young football writer?
Oh, good Lord, Sarah. What a seriously beautiful letter. Lovely letter. And it's always good to talk Rilke. There's a line of Rilke's that have patience with everything that remains unsolved in your heart. Live in the question. That actually tell my own kids or try and encourage them. I don't think they listen. But when someone asked me whether they should follow in my own path, I always warn college students to do anything, but I'm actually writing a book at the moment about World Cup to World Cup, my life as defined by them, which is a lot of the kind of, well, I'll just say it's only reinforced what a crazy leap into creating Men in Blazers was, and I'd never advise anyone to do that, following that pathway. But Raw, what would you say in a serious fashion?
Well, to be honest, my serious, really earnest answer is that the media, as it traditionally was, is I think as Americans just say in shambles. We would say a shambles.
Yep.
It is a shambles.
Meltdown.
I think part of the problem in America is probably the misuse of the phrase in shambles when they should be saying it's a shambles.
Is that true? That makes my piss boil, Raw.
Yeah, absolutely. It really annoys me. It's the one Americanism I just can't deal with. So strictly speaking, yeah, your parents will tell you not to be a journalist because it's a dying industry.
Oh my God.
But I think just have a crack, if I'm honest, because whilst the gatekeepers of stories and information and all that stuff, they are crumbling left, right, and centre. Not Men in Blazers, obviously. Men in Blazers are thriving, but just announced Vamos, a whole new network. There's never been great demand for stories. People love stories. People read far more than they ever have, or they consume. It might be a TikTok video, it might be on YouTube, it might be on whatever medium you choose, but there is more and more media out there. So I think if the thing that I would say about being lucky enough to do the job that I do is that I never really feel like I'm going to work, and that's the thing that I want for my kids. The only thing obviously they're too young to have any idea. I mean, Ed is going to play for Liverpool. That apparently is decided, and then apparently he's going to go and play abroad. That's his dream.
Can I ask again? MLS in your future? Hard-hitting question. Sorry, I'm in the media. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he'll end up in MLS. It's fine. Maybe Leader MX covered on Vamos. Like Pete, there's so much out there that people want to consume. So if that's what you want to do, and if that's something you're passionate about and you believe in, and you're willing to kind of work to make it work, then yeah, have a go.
Did you always want to be it, Ro?
I don't ever remember deciding I wanted to be a journalist. It just was. That's the only way I can kind of characterise it. That I knew on some level without ever thinking about it. Right, that's what I'd like to do. And I actually wanted to be a proper journalist rather than a football journalist. I wanted to be like a war correspondent. But then I realised as I got older, it's very dangerous and hard, so it's probably just easier. No, if the toughest thing you're having to do in your job is drive between Liverpool and Manchester on a Saturday afternoon, doing all right, Rog.
90 minutes in the rain. I stood there.
It's been tough.
Proud in the rain.
I've been on the M62 for 2 hours. It's really putting the miles in for my journalism. No,
and then made it back home when that curry really hit.
Yeah, fortunately.
I don't want to get into that.
I've been lucky that I've been able to combine. Football's a great way to think about much bigger stuff, which is what makes it so special. And
that's it, baby.
I'm lucky to exist at a time when the football media are prepared to do that. I'm actually doing a book review for The Observer of 2 books about the World Cup that have just come out here. And what's interesting about both of them is that they are both attempts to do what's been missing for years about the World Cup, which is the World Cup reflects the world that it takes place in. And that didn't, 30 years ago, we didn't think about football like that. We think about football like that now, and that's a significant shift. But yeah, Sarah, if you really want to be a football journalist, at least give it a go.
Yeah, I mean,
you can always get a proper job later.
I can only echo what you said. I mean, the journalism part is the part to be avoided. Journalism is being absolutely battered. It was hard for me to get a foothold at the very beginning because writing and talking, so much of it's hard to get value. When I started, the US team had so many journalists following it from so many outlets, and now there's so few, which is hard. It's hard to witness. But football has never been bigger. That's what I'd say to you, and to everyone listening, thinking about getting involved. Focus on the football part. The soccer is surging here, really surging. So much opportunity. I mean, to a large degree, the growth of our network is living proof of that. But to thrive, Sarah, you've got to think differently. You've got to create differently. You've got to get ahead of that curve, like Pep Guardiola shutting the game down. That would be my advice. You've clearly got passion. That's the first step. You've got to channel it into a unique space, a unique tone, a unique voice, unique platform, and make yourself indispensable as opposed to just making noise. I mean, you've got to be that signal, not the noise. Football world will always be all the better off if you have your singular voice being part of it. In a way, we're not talking about singular voices. Well, that got a bit serious, a bit quick. Sarah, send us your postal. We'll send you both a coveted MIB patch. And keep all of you sending your letters, your questions for Big Roar and me to meninblazers@gmail.com. That's it for today. This week, our New York City show debuts Thursday morning, in which we welcome US number 1 Matt Freese, New York Knicks, Carl Anthony Towns, and Chelsea fan extraordinaire, Mr. Josh Hart. What a human being. A quite packed Terminal 5. Seattle, we're coming to you next week. I cannot wait to be in your Emerald City's embrace. I'm off to London imminently. I crap you not to eat Nando's with a Premier League wonder. But most of all, thank you, Raw, you beautiful Crown Prince of Harrogate.
What are you going for Nando's wise? What's your chosen spice?
Bro, I'm only gonna Nando's to introduce the whole of England to lemon pepper wet, baby. Fusing two. Can you imagine a Nando's JR Crickets crossover, Raw?
That would be an experience.
It's what the world needs, baby. This is Rog, sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted and courage.